This evening marks the 7th day of Hanukkah, a joyful annual Jewish festival. At this time of the year, we UUs also celebrate the winter solstice, which is, of course, today, Christmas coming this week, and Kwanzaa. But do you know how the story of Hanukkah began? You're about to find out. Long, long ago, about 332 before the Common Era, Alexander the Great, a young man whose empire eventually covered about 2 million square miles from Greece into Egypt and across Asia into India's Indus River, defeated the Persians who controlled Jerusalem and Judea. Alexander's conquests marked the beginning of the Hellenistic, that is the Greek rule in Jerusalem. And I was surprised to learn this was the first real encounter the Jewish people ever had with European civilization. In light of later events, it's important to note that Alexander was a student of Aristotle, who is said to have believed that the Jewish people were a race of philosophers. As a result, Alexander didn't interfere that much with existing Jewish religion and law. But time passed, and more than a century later, around 167 before the Common Era, a harsh and prideful king named Antiochus Epiphanes gained power over Jerusalem and the Jewish people. But Antiochus wasn't content, as Alexander had been, to simply collect taxes and tribute and allow the Jews to continue with their religion and their customs. Instead, he wanted to unify all of the lands under his sway by imposing Greek culture and gods on everyone. However, the Jews were unique among the rest of Antiochus's subjects. They were monotheists. That is, they believed in one God rather than many, and refused to worship a pantheon of gods. They were determined to worship in their own way and honor their sacred historic traditions. Antiochus insisted that everyone follow Greek customs and beliefs, and he demanded that the Jews abandon their festivals, their food, their scriptures, their religion, even their way of dress. Under his rule, the practice of Judaism was outlawed. The study of Torah, the sacred text of the Jewish people, was forbidden. Jewish festivals were banned. Soldiers even killed families who circumcised their infant sons. At the heart of Jewish religious life was the great temple in Jerusalem, the holiest of holy places, a place where they believed that God dwelt. But Antiochus, the temple itself, the sacred center of Jewish life, was desecrated. The king ordered altars to Greek gods, including Zeus, to be built inside, filling the holy space with idols, defiling it by sacrificing pigs on the altar, and leaving the building in ruins. Many Jews were terrified. They felt they had no choice but to obey the king's commands. But a small band of determined souls refused to give up their faith. They would not bow to the foreign gods. They would not let their tradition slip away. This brave group was known as the Maccabees. Initially led by Mattathias, his 5 sons followed in his footsteps, especially Judah Maccabee. His name literally means hammer. Compared with the king's army, the Maccabees were few in number, but they were strong in spirit, fierce in hope, and committed to the freedom and to their beliefs. Against all odds, after 3 years of fierce fighting, they were able to recapture Jerusalem. And though the fighting continued a total of 25 years, The Maccabees eventually won. They defeated the mighty army of Antiochus and reclaimed the temple. But the joy of their victory turned to sorrow when they saw what had been done to their sacred place. The temple was filthy and broken, strewn with idols and neglect. Some were wondering if it was even worth saving. Yet the Maccabees would not relent. Instead, they rolled up their sleeves and got to work. They removed every idol. They purified and restored the temple with love and care. When their work was complete, they held a magnificent rededication ceremony. The word Hanukkah means dedication. That word and the holiday serve as a reminder of the moment when the temple was made holy again. One story from that rededication became the most famous of all. That when the Maccabees tried to relight the great menorah, the great multi-branched lamp that tradition said must never be extinguished, they found only a tiny amount of oil, barely enough for one day. Undaunted, they lit the menorah anyway, and miraculously, the small jar of oil burned for 8 days, long enough for new oil to be prepared. And that is why, to this day, Jewish families celebrate Hanukkah for 8 nights, beginning on the 25th of Kislev on the Hebrew calendar, at the darkest time of year. Back then, they used oil, but these days, most people light candles on the branches of the menorah. They continue to include oil in the celebration. They eat fried foods, and they spin the dreidel, whose letters stand for the saying, Nes Gadol Haya Sham, a great miracle happened there. As every candle is lit in every home, the Jewish people remember the heart of the Hanukkah story, that even in the deepest darkness, light can be found, and that the flame of religious freedom and individual liberty must be celebrated and cherished, protected, and passed on, so that it shines for all people in every place at all time. Here's something that I never realized. I was listening to Rabbi and historian Ken Shapiro, and he pointed out that if Antiochus had succeeded in conquering the Jews, if he had been able to eradicate the singular Jewish culture and religion, today there would be no Judaism, there would be no Christianity, there would be no Islam. I recently read another, more personal Hanukkah story related by Abigail Pogrebin in an issue of Hassad magazine. She wrote, I was sitting in the Chicago hospital where my father-in-law, Milton Shapiro, has often resided since November, when I had an experience that crystallized the meaning of Hanukkah for me. Milton's wife and Abigail's mother-in-law, Phyllis, and their twin daughters, Sharon and Fern, both of whom also live in Chicago, never leave his side. They just sit, read, and play word games on their iPhones. They worry and chat, knit and parse blood pressure readings and dialysis cycles. They don't tire or grow restless. They just stay. And when David and Abigail flew in from New York with their children, Ben and Molly, during Hanukkah, they joined them, and they all camped out in the hospital too. As I watched Milt, Abigail writes, battle a failing kidney in his green patient gown, I thought about miracles. The miracle of the oil lasting one more day, the miracle of doctors who keep trying, the miracle of a family that never leaves your side. Each person who shows up at the hospital, niece, brother-in-law, friend, seems like another candle, and the room grows palpably brighter with each arrival. I wonder, has that ever happened for you? That you felt the light grow when you were surrounded by love in a time of need? So many rabbis have talked to me about light, Abigail continues. And when I saw it there, we added another candle to the menorah that night when we got home in Phyllis's condo. I've read so many teachings about adding light on this Shag Urim, Festival of Lights, how we illuminate the darkness, the darkest time of year, and trust there will be a brighter day. Here's what Rabbi Barbara Penzer wrote in a guide to Jewish practice. Jews light lights, not to banish the darkness, but to be reminded of the miracles of everyday life. And Abraham Joshua Heschel, a seminal thinker and leading social justice activist of the 20th century, has written, "We are called to bring together the sparks to preserve single moments of radiance." That phrase struck me, a single moment of radiance. Can you remember during this Hanukkah season a single moment of radiance in your life? And to keep them alive in our lives, to defy absurdity and despair, and to wait for God to say again, "Let there be light," and there will be light. I think it's important to remember about Hanukkah in these times, how it has shaped the Jewish imagination and the beliefs of Jewish people everywhere, and how it can offer us hope and sustain our faith. Like the David and Goliath story, the Maccabee story teaches us that a small group of dedicated people can save a civilization, even if that civilization's culture has been defiled, even if its infrastructure has been debased and even destroyed. That courageous individuals will rise up and say that this is unacceptable. That brave souls will raise their voices and call us back to our highest values. And even if the fight has to continue for decades, they will find the energy to clean up the mess, to rebuild, and to rededicate. The Jewish people needed the lessons of the Maccabees in 167 BCE, and they needed them after World War II and the Holocaust, when they were fighting to establish a homeland in Palestine. And they have needed them since. The Israelis certainly need them today, as they try to cope not only with longstanding external threats to their existence, but a massive internal threat to the highly ethical, justice-based values that have been at the core of Jewish culture for millennia. And so the Israeli people continue to protest against the merciless war their government waged on Gaza against Hamas, a war that has displaced 90% of the Palestinians who live there and killed 70,000 people, an ongoing struggle that leaves the Palestinian population lacking the very basics needed for survival: shelter, food, medicine. This year, many Jews light the Hanukkah candles with a mixture of emotions. The traditional joy of the festival, of course, but also included our sadness, frustration, and even anger at the strife in Gaza, sorrow at the recent tragedy at the Bondi Beach in Australia, and worry or even fear about increased anti-Semitism here in this country and around the world. Hanukkah candles are supposed to be displayed in public for all to see, and some are doing so in a spirit of defiance, resilience, and unity. Some are even including prayers to express solidarity with the Palestinian people. For others, the ongoing challenges make an overt celebration feel somewhat inappropriate and perhaps even dangerous. It is a time to hold multiple emotions of sadness, fear, hope, and joy simultaneously. I heard Rabbi and philosopher Jonathan Sacks tell a story. He says he once saw a teacher of a group of 5-year-old children do something rather dramatic and possibly even disturbing. It was a task designed to teach the children something that they would never forget. The teacher had the kids make a small model of ancient Jerusalem and then taught them a song. At the end of the day, the teacher did a shocking thing. She smashed and completely destroyed the model. She asked the children, "Do we still have the model?" "No," they answered. And then she asked, "Do we still have the song?" "Yes," they replied. Well, the physical thing, the model, could be destroyed. The spiritual entity, the song, remained in their hearts and minds. And that's the difference between a material object and a spiritual idea. The intangible can never be taken from you, no matter what happens. The Jewish people may have lost the temple. They may be under threat, even as we here in this country are today. But the idea of freedom, of independence of thought and belief and of action, of respect for heritage and history, still lives in the Jewish imagination and in the hearts and minds of so many. And the undeniable truth is that it's only because of their dedication to these intangible spiritual ideas that the Jewish people are still among us. And so we dare not lose our own strong embrace of these ideas. If we are to keep the light of liberty burning bright in our homes, our hearts, and in our country. So be it, and blessed be.